Hi, and welcome to another episode of Twisted Talks. I'm Tanya.
I'm Josh.
And you said you had something to tell me, and I want to know.
It's an update for you and an update for everyone, because it's actually an update related to when we covered Ted Bundy and one of the suspected victims. So one of the suspected victims that we covered, and that was largely believed to be Ted Bundy responsible, has now been solved. And it was not Ted Bundy for this specific victim.
Which victim?
So Burlington Police Department announced, when was this? Not long ago, within the last few weeks, but by the time this has been posted, it'll be a bit longer than a few weeks. That the murder of Rita Patricia Curran, who was murdered in her Burlington apartment in 1971, and, you know, people assumed, and it seemed like it could have been Ted Bundy. They actually found DNA on a cigarette butt that showed that the man responsible for the murder of Rita Curran, who was 24 at the time, was William DeRoos, and he's already dead. He died years ago. It was solved through modern DNA and genealogy technology and the careful preservation of evidence from the crime scene in 1971.
That's mad.
A cigarette butt found next to the body of Patricia Curran had the DNA on it.
A fag butt from fucking 52 years ago.
Yeah.
Solved a case. Like, that's insane.
The case is now no longer a cold case, and it was not Ted Bundy, despite speculation, because it is closed and the original murder is dead. So I suppose it's not really justice, but at least they have answers.
Yeah, some bit of closure at least.
But yeah, no, because I was looking up stuff. I was actually on Reddit in the true crime section, looking for inspiration for solo cases and stuff, and I saw the name Rita Curran, and I was like, that's ringing a lot of bells. And I clicked into it, and I was like, and then I was like, maybe I'll try and cover that as a solo case. And I was like, not really, there's not enough, and most of it's covered in the Ted Bundy joint case we did. So I was like, I'll just announce it at the start of whatever the next one we record is.
Which is this one.
And
this one is Lizzie Borden. So today we are doing a joint case, and it is going to be the case of Lizzie Borden.
Exactly. And I suppose with that, will I?
Yeah, you might as well. Tell the listeners what her middle name is, because this blew my mind.
Look at my eyes.
What?
Why am I crying?
Are you manic?
No!
It's the way you looked at me. That was a manic look.
No, that was my look of shock at the fact that there's tears that for no reason.
Oh, do you think maybe you were upset by Rita Curran? You're not as emotionally untouchable as you think you are.
Shut the fuck up.
Don't slander my name like this.
Oh my god, how dare you ruin my heartless repertoire. Anyway, tears under control, whatever that was about. It's just the deliciousness of this coffee. It brings joy to my eyeballs.
Welcome.
Shout out to Justine
for buying us coffee and hot chocolate. I've smashed my hot chocolate.
And Tanya, the delivery service.
Yes, Tanya's taxi.
And the recording studio.
Yes, Colin. Good old Colin. Now, tell the listeners Lizzie's middle name.
Let's jump in, yeah.
I was mind shocked, mind blown.
But at least you know, it came from the family, I guess. Okay, so Lizzie Andrew Borden.
Yes, he said Andrew.
I did. I just thought it's a very strange name.
Yeah,
like, not strange to have as a... Well, I've never heard it as a middle name either.
I feel like it's uncommon for the time.
And I feel like I've never heard a woman with a middle name like that.
Yeah, like I feel like nowadays it's quite common for girls to have like more masculine names and boys to have more feminine names, because I think we're all at the point where we're like,
do what you want.
A name. Like, as long as you don't call them something stupid, go for it. Like fucking XY-Archangel EL or whatever the fuck you name that child. Stormy, you look just like mommy, baby.
She started on the surgeries already.
Oh,
sorry.
I do think though Stormy isn't as bad as like some of the celebrity names out there, like Apple.
Oh god, no.
Apple. Gwyneth Paltrow named her daughter Apple.
I've met someone called Apple before.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I'll go into more detail afterwards because I don't want to say it on here.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I think Apple.
For privacy reasons, not for my privacy. I don't really give a fuck about mine.
But Apple is just, especially in this day and age, like you hear Apple and you think like iPhone, not.
Yeah, you think technology, like.
But yeah.
And also, I think as well, it's like, I don't know where I was going to say, but something else has just overridden my brain. Isn't it ironic how horses love apples, and apple and coppel sound similar, and coppel is the Irish for horse?
I like what you did there. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
I just think that's interesting.
There you go, lads. Your Irish word of the day is
coppel.
Coppel. Coppel.
And that's probably the only Irish I remember apart from...
Means
I nearly
horse.
said apart from Ola. Apart from Sean Awalia, Conasatotu, Tufane, Sha and Niha, and a hand over tree. And that's, I think, a cooig. No, a Caharacoog. There we go. That's as far as I can go. When I'm on holidays in America, I'm like, oh my God, you're Irish? I'm going to be like, by definition. Not by education.
Just start spitting out random Irish words. Like, they're not going to know the difference.
Banya!
Pog Mahone. Anish.
There's surely no Pog Mahone, actually. I feel like
surely.
That's surely a globally known one.
For those of you who don't know, Pog Mahone means I love you.
Definitely. For those of you that do know, shh.
Keep to yourself. Keep to yourself.
So,
gatekeep.
Gatekeep. Lizzie Andrew Borden was born in Fall River, Massachusetts on the 19th of July, 1860. So, we've quite an old case we're doing. Lizzie was the third child born to Sarah and Andrew Borden. The firstborn being Emma Lenora Borden, who was born on the 1st of March 1851. The secondborn being Alice Esther Borden, who was born on the 3rd of May 1856. Now, sadly, Lizzie never got to meet her sister Alice, as at not even 2 years old on the 10th of March 1858. She passed away due to hydrocephalus, which is the build-up of fluid in the ventricles deep within the brain, which increases the size of the ventricles and puts pressure on the brain. And obviously, I suppose, the time it was, and also, I suppose, what it is. There was nothing that could have been really done by there. That was probably something that was 99.9% or whatever fatal back then, not real statistics, just my...
opinion.
Speculation.
Josh's speculation.
My hypothesis.
And Lizzie Borden.
So, Lizzie's father, Andrew, hence the middle name, I guess, was of English and Welsh descent. He grew up in very modest surroundings and struggled financially in his youth. However, he later became an affluent and successful property developer.
Come on, Andrew.
Now, obviously, he did stuff before that, and I'll touch off that a little bit as well. But, at the time of the incident, that's kind of his main gist. Are you taking shots of it?
Shot for Andrew's success.
I've seen it all. Lizzie's mother, Sarah, died on the 26th of March, 1863. The cause of death was uterine congestion and spinal disease.
Oh, that sounds painful.
Yeah, I didn't know that could get congested. I know you can get, stones and whatever.
I am physically clenching right now. I can't...
Yeah. I didn't even look into that anymore because I honestly don't want to know how that works.
What was the other thing? I heard uterine congestion.
Spinal disease.
Okay, my brain.
So I'm assuming maybe the spinal disease caused the uterine congestion, maybe, but I don't know. When Sarah died, Lizzie was not even 3 years old, and Emma was only 12. The death of their mother had a major impact on Lizzie, and following it, Emma became Lizzie's only friend and was essentially like a mother figure to Lizzie. About 3 years after the death of Sarah, Andrew Borden got remarried to Abby Durfee Gray. The family was still living together at their bungalow in Fall River. Lizzie and Emma Borden had a traditional and religious upbringing, I suppose standard for the time, and Lizzie regularly attended the Central Congregational Church. As a young woman, Lizzie taught at Sunday school and was involved in church activities, and she was also invested in multiple social movements that were taking place at the time, such as the reform of women's rights.
On Lizzie.
Go on, yes. Lizzie and Emma were not close with their stepmother, Abby, and Lizzie would refer to her as Mrs. Borden. The sisters believed that Abby had only married their father for his money and that she played a role in how tight he was with his money, because if he spent less, there would be more left for Abby.
Fair enough.
Now, whether that's the truth or not...
I ain't saying she a gold digger.
But I'm, saying...
She ain't messing with no bro who broke.
Yeah.
I ain't saying the way it needs to be said.
I was like, for a second, I was like, why are you stuttering? And then I was like, yes.
Oh, see, I just thought that you didn't continue because you didn't know there was a clean version.
Huh?
I just thought that you didn't continue my singing because you didn't know that there was a clean version.
I didn't.
I only know that there's a clean version because of Glee.
Ah.
Because obviously the cast of Glee was extremely white.
Yeah.
Extremely white.
Yeah, there was
They couldn't cover that song without making some changes.
But yeah, obviously I suppose their opinion was married for money, and that if Andrew spent less, then there'd be more left for Abby, or that's what they thought Abby would be thinking. But there's nothing to back that up.
Yeah.
But that's just
It's their theory.
Their
which I suppose
opinion, which could be true, but it could equally be untrue.
It could be true, or it could just be that she wasn't their mother, and she was like an interloper, and
Yeah. The Borden family had a live-in maid, Bridget Sullivan, who I believe was an Irish immigrant.
She was.
Yes.
Good old Bridgie.
Who was, I wrote that next, who was 25 years old and Irish, and Bridget testified that Lizzie and Emma would rarely eat dinner with their father and stepmother. The family lived comfortably due to Andrew's financial success. Initially, Andrew had made money through the manufacturing and sales of furniture and caskets before he became a successful property developer. Andrew was also the director of multiple textile mills and several commercial properties. On top of that, he was also the president of the Union Savings Bank and the director at the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company. So that gives a fair idea of just how well off this man and his family would have been.
Because he's got
his fingers in so many pies.
Shot for Andrew's success.
Oh, coconut cappuccino.
Bit of ASMR.
Yeah, I'm wondering did the microphone pick that up because I was trying to. However, even though Andrew was making so much money, he was known for being very tight with it. Even though the family was wealthy, they didn't even have indoor plumbing, which would have been a common thing for those with wealth to have at the time.
I read that.
Yeah, like it's not a thing that everyone would have, but people who had money would have it.
And he had money, but he still made his kids piss and poo in a chamber pots.
Yeah. In a bucket and a mop. Well, this was beep. A
bucket and a mop. That's a whop.
Even when electricity became available for use inside of homes of those who could afford such a thing then, like Andrew being one of those who could certainly afford it, refused to invest in it. Kerosene oil lamps and chamber pots it would continue to be for the Borden family.
I would
have resent just over. I could move on and build a bridge with the electricity thing, but the toilets, the plumbing, I would hold a grudge.
Like all their friends are out there getting
I'd shit in his pillow.
Baths. All their friends are out there getting nice hot baths, the luxury of a toilet. Meanwhile, Lizzie and Emma are over here with their fucking chamber pot, pouring out the window.
Stop the lights, like I would not.
It's medieval, is what it is, Andrew. I can't live like this.
Jesus Christ! It's the late 1800s. For God's sake, get yourself some plumbing.
It's the modern age.
Imagine though that to them being
that probably was the conversation that was had. Father, it is 1892
and we don't even have a toilet.
Why are we living in the dark ages, Father? Why?
Oh, if only they knew how far the world would come.
Apologies for anyone who
is now deaf.
Is wearing earphones.
Yeah, I was just thinking as we were shouting, I was like, oopsie. Oh well, they're well used to it by now. If I haven't died from the loudness of my robust and random laughing here and there, they'll survive.
Also, guys, we're recording 3 cases today, and I am feeling
spicy.
Yeah.
At the time of his death, Andrew's estate was worth, I believe, around $300,000 at the time.
Which would
doesn't sound like much, but
billions.
In 2023 would be the equivalent of almost 9.9 million.
Ah, Andrew.
You know,
and he still wouldn't get a fucking toilet.
Do you know? In May of 1892, Andrew found pigeons that were in their barn. He thought they were attracting local children that wanted to, I suppose, hunt them or whatever. So he killed the pigeons with a hatchet.
What the fuck?
However, Andrew didn't know and probably didn't care that Lizzie had not long built a nest for them and grown attached to the pigeons.
Oh, no.
So I guess they were her pets in a way.
No.
It was reported that Lizzie was quite upset over the killing of the pigeons, which honestly I would be too. I'd be angry and upset.
I would never speak to him again. Like, no. I would honestly, I know it was different times and she was like seen as a spinster or whatever, but I would have taken my spinster ass up out of that house.
I would have taken my hatchet, but anyway, more on that later.
Mm-hmm.
In late June of 1892, Andrew and Abby decided to take a trip outside of Fall River, which was out of character for Abby, so I'm assuming Andrew would have, I suppose, probably on business left often, here and there. That's speculation, I haven't read that. But obviously Abby would be more inclined to stay in Fall River. But they both went on their little outing or whatever. However, when they got back a short while later, they were greeted by a broken into and ransacked desk in their house.
Okay.
Valuables were missing, such as money, horse, car tickets, a watch with sentimental value to Abby, and a pocketbook. The total value of what was stolen would be about $2,300 in today's money.
Okay.
However, at the time, Lizzie, Emma, and live-in maid Bridget were all inside the house and nothing of theirs had been taken. the burglar must have snuck in and straight back out. Unless, of course, one of the sisters, perhaps Lizzie, was responsible. But that is nothing more than speculation and isn't proven.
I'll teach you to kill my pigeons.
Yeah. There were rumours going around in previous years that Lizzie often stole items from shops. However, again, there is no official record or proof, therefore it is only hearsay. But these rumours do play a large role in why it is speculated that Lizzie was the burglar. I would also imagine her dislike of her stepmother and how she did not agree with how tight her father was with money could also have been a motive. If she wasn't given what she may have felt entitled to, then maybe she was just like, I'm going to take it.
Mm-hmm. It's mine.
It's mine. It's like, you can replace that. You've got money. The burglary was investigated, but no one was ever caught for it. Andrew forbid the girls from ever speaking of it. I suppose, oh my God, we got burgled, I'm ashamed. We're rich.
God,
That doesn't happen to us.
Well, maybe if you lived in your big house with more security because you've got money, Andrew.
Yeah, maybe if you had a toilet. Lizzie might not have
maybe
done
if you had a toilet and you let your kids bathe in like a hot bath.
He
they
also
wouldn't be stealing from you.
commanded
that
all the doors in the house always be locked for the foreseeable future. It is said that an argument took place amongst the family in July of 1892, sometime around the 21st, which pushed the sisters to take a quote-unquote vacation to New Bedford, a town about 15 miles or 24 kilometres away. They stayed there for no longer than a week and had returned on the 26th of July, only days before the murderers occurred.
Oh my goodness.
However, even on their return to Fall River, it is said that Lizzie stayed at a local rooming house, essentially what we would now consider or call a hotel, within the city instead of going straight back home to her family home. It is speculated and very possible that the fight was about money. There had been tension growing within the family for some months, and it had only gotten worse when Andrew Borden gifted real estate to multiple members of his wife's family.
Sorry now.
We can't have a potty, but there's a house for everyone in the audience. I would say, I see you red, and not in a spicy way.
Red.
So to multiple members of his wife's family, and as we know, Lizzie and Emma were not fond of their stepmother, Abby. And after Abby's sister had gotten a house from Andrew, Lizzie and Emma demanded they receive rental property too. And to be fair, I don't see that as spite. I see that as fairly reasonable.
Like, he gave property to his in-laws.
Yeah.
Why not to his children?
So what he did was, he sold them the house they had lived in until their mother had died for $1.
Bargain.
You wouldn't get that at Deals.
No, you would not.
Please do not die.
I'm okay.
Thank you.
I've got a tickly.
Tickly.
I've got a tickly cough.
She's on the way out.
You should have seen me when I was doing yoga yesterday.
Krista Talks exclusive. Tanya's death.
In this week's episode, Tanya passes away.
However, a few weeks before the murders, the sisters sold the property back to their father for $5,000.
Did fucking right.
Which would be almost $165,000 today.
They made a profit.
Yes.
Girl boss.
And the whole family were very ill for multiple days before the murders, and Abby feared that they had been poisoned due to the fact Andrew was apparently not a popular man.
Is that because he wouldn't buy his family a toilet?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So, but clearly he has obviously got enemies and frenemies that are not just his children. Mm-hmm. A friend of the family later came forward theorising that it could have been the mutton that they had left on the stove for days and been eating that was making them sick.
Sorry, what?
I was like, okay, I don't eat meat, but when I did, you can't munch on a meat dish for days, especially when it hasn't been in a fridge or freezer. I mean, I get they didn't, have them then.
But still.
But Andrew, mate, you're loaded. Buy fresh food. Also, at the time they were ill, the temperature in the area had soared and 90 people had died from extreme heat, most of them young children, but this heat would have obviously made the mutton spoil even faster, making food poisoning even more likely. So, girl, you're not been poisoned, you're just stupid.
Yeah. You poisoned your goddamn self.
Yeah.
And your family.
On the morning of the 3rd of August 1982, Abby Borden went to speak with the closest physician, Dr. Bowen. Abby told him that she thought their mysterious sickness was somebody trying to poison them, or more specifically poison Andrew, due to the fact it wasn't just his children he wasn't popular with. There's no fact. The doctor came to the Borden house to check on them, and it is said that on his arrival, Lizzie darted up the stairs. As well as that, Andrew was not particularly welcoming. Andrew claimed that he was in fine health and that his money won't pay for it. He was not giving no money to no doctor. Get out me gaff. We won't even get into our plumbing. Do you think I'm going to pay you for a little bit?
This man is an absolute miser. Like, he is Ebenezer Scrooge.
He clearly has some pent up trauma from struggling in his youth.
Yeah, definitely.
Because like this is like it has to be psychological. This having so much money and not being willing to part with it at all.
Like, not even a little bit to pay a doctor.
Like, not even to live.
After giving your whole family food poisoning.
And free houses.
Yeah. Fuck, like.
But anyway. So the same day, only a few hours later, Lizzie Borden went into town and stopped off at the pharmacy. At the pharmacy, she unsuccessfully attempted to buy prussic acid, or as it's more commonly known, hydrogen cyanide. And it's extremely poisonous, in case the word cyanide didn't give that away for you guys. Lizzie insisted that she needed it to clean a sealskin cape. If that means a cape made of literal sealskin, I am extremely angry, but I'm going to put it in the past because it's the 1800s.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
Moving on from the animal abuse. The Borden family was also expecting John Morse to arrive that day, Lizzie and Emma's uncle, through their deceased mother, Sarah. John arrived in the early afternoon. He was invited to stay to talk business with Andrew. It is speculated that the conversation between John and Andrew may have further aggravated the tense atmosphere, as it was about property. That evening, Lizzie went out to visit her neighbour and friend Alice Russell. At around 9 p.m. that night, Lizzie returned home and she went straight upstairs to her room, completely ignoring both her uncle and her father, who were in the sitting room. And then we passed the torch over to Tanya.
So now we are heading into August 4th, 1892.
D-Day.
D-Day. So on the morning of August 4th, 1892, see, that's your fault, because on the layout that you made, you had it down as 1982.
I was thinking that because I also wrote in my research 19 something a few times. I had to go back and change it.
So it's 1892. It's August 4th. It's the morning, and Lizzie chose not to join her family for breakfast. So they ate as normal
surprising.
Just didn't really give it much attention, I suppose. Maybe
because like the maid had already said that the girls don't even eat dinner with them, so
and Lizzie was pressed. Okay, so she said, "I'm not eating breakfast with you peasants."
She was like, "Fuck y'all."
So the family ate breakfast as normal, and they bid goodbye to John Morse, who I assume Josh has mentioned. So he was leaving to visit family across town. Andrew invited him back for dinner if he wanted to join them. And then Andrew went on his usual morning walk, and he also intended to run some errands in the town. Meanwhile, Abby went and found Bridget Sullivan, their maid, who I saw in the research, the family called her Maggie, but I will be calling her Bridget.
Yeah, I didn't see that myself.
Now,
what
Abby,
a weird nickname to give someone called Bridget.
Yeah, Maggie. Like, I don't know.
Like Bridge, yeah, Bridgie. But Maggie?
Bridgie. I don't know. So Abby went and found Bridget Sullivan, their maid. She was apparently called Maggie by the family. Now, Abby asked Bridget to go clean the inside and outside of the windows. And apparently, as Josh said, it was really, really hot that summer. People had already died. And Bridget was not only Irish, but also still feeling a bit rough from the bout of food poisoning. And I just want to say, I would simply pass away with immediate effect.
I'd puke in her face.
Like, if you come to me and you ask me to lift a finger, I'm passing away with immediate effect. And I'm going to make a mess too.
Yeah.
You clean up. You clean up, Abby!
Bitch.
So Bridget did as she was asked, but she did have to go get sick outside first.
Yeah.
She took about 15 minutes to gather herself before heading back inside to begin her daily duties. So she started with the breakfast dishes and cleaning up the dining room before she got a brush and a bucket of water from the cellar. And trekked out into the unbearable heat. At around 9:30 a.m, Bridget saw Lizzie Borden lingering in the back doorway as she was heading towards the barn, and she told Lizzie there would be no need to lock the doors as long as she was outside cleaning the windows. Inside the house, Abby Borden had been puttering around, cleaning and decluttering and generally fixing up the house, but at some point between 9 and 10 a.m, Abby was interrupted when she was attacked. Now, from a forensic view, it was clear from the placement and direction of her injuries that Abby had been facing her killer when she was initially attacked. And then when she collapsed to the floor, every blow after that hit the back of her head. Abby suffered around 17 strikes of an axe, as we know, which was very excessive in my opinion. And to me, it seems like there was a lot of anger and a lot of rage involved. Yeah. Like, it wasn't...
Plumbing!
Okay.
That was probably what was ordered at the time. Plumbing.
So not long after this, Andrew Borden would return from his daily walk, which he had cut short, and it's thought that this was because he still felt unwell. Did it yourself. A neighbour saw him walk to his front door, only to find that he could not get in. And it's not known what stopped him from being able to open the door, but the neighbour observed him banging on the front door for a few minutes until Bridget opened it for him. Bridget had heard him from where she was washing the windows. At this point, she was now inside the house. She had completed the outside windows. And oddly, Bridget had heard Lizzie laughing as she struggled to open the door for Andrew. And apparently from where Bridget saw Lizzie sitting on the stairs/landing, she would have been able to see Abby's dead body, where she lay bloody and beaten, bleeding out on the guest room carpet. And once Andrew was inside the house, he spent a few moments downstairs in the dining room speaking to Lizzie in, quote, low tones. So I'm assuming hushed voices. They were probably arguing over something. Maybe he kind of thought that she had locked him out or something and he was giving out to her over it. Then he went up to his bedroom before moving to the sitting room for a nap. Now Lizzie spent some time in the kitchen ironing, sewing and reading a magazine while Bridget finished cleaning the last few windows. They had some chit-chat. Lizzie told her about a sale happening in one of the town's shops and gave her permission to go if she felt up to it. And Lizzie also mentioned that Abby had gotten a note asking her to travel out of the house to visit a sick friend. Meanwhile, poor Abby's dead on the guest room floor.
Yeah.
So Bridget
Take note.
Yeah. So Bridget was still feeling unwell. I'm gonna have to take my glasses off because they're actually just killing me. So Bridget was still feeling unwell, so she decided instead she would go to her bedroom in the attic so she could get some rest. Now, no more than 15 minutes later, at around 11 a.m, a frantic Lizzie called up to Bridget saying, quote, Maggie, come quick, father's dead, someone came in and killed him. I would like to mention that Bridget had heard nothing suspicious in that 15-minute period where she was up in her room. So a terrified and... I'm skipping ahead. So once downstairs, Lizzie warned Bridget against going into the sitting room where Andrew Borden now lay dead. It was a very gory sight. He was still bleeding, which suggested that he had been killed very recently. He had been struck 10 or 11 times with a small bladed weapon, and his eyeball was cut clean in half, which apparently suggests that he was attacked while he was sleeping, maybe because if he was awake he would have tried to defend himself with his hands.
Yeah.
Or he would have tried to protect his face with his hands. Now, a terrified and panicked Bridget was sent to fetch Dr. Bowen, who had visited the house only the night before, but he was not in. So Bridget returned to relay this to Lizzie, and she was then sent to fetch Alice Russell, as Lizzie told her that she could not bear to stay in the house alone. Local woman, Mrs. Adelaide Churchill, had noticed Bridget's distress, and so out of either neighbourly concern or neighbourly nosiness, she went to check what was going on at the Borden house. She spoke to Lizzie for a few minutes before she went to find a doctor as well. Now, word quickly spread, and within 5 minutes of Adelaide's departure from Lizzie, someone had used a phone to notify the police. Like, talk about neighbours being nosy.
Makes sense.
In this sense, it was very
No,
helpful.
the only thing that I have that's different is that Adelaide didn't leave.
Okay, because in my research it said that she did come back.
Oh, okay, maybe she left, called the police, came back then.
She left and went to go find Dr. Bowen. So the Fall
I
River...
thought it was... Who went to get Dr. Bowen?
So
I thought it was Bridget.
Bridget had gone to get him, but he wasn't in. So then
okay.
Bridget came back and said that to Lizzie, and Lizzie was like, go get Alice Russell, the neighbour that Lizzie was friends with.
Yeah.
Because Lizzie couldn't bear to be in the house on her own. Then when Bridget went to fetch Alice, that's when Mrs. Churchill came along and spoke to Lizzie and was like, right, I'm going to try to find a doctor.
Yes.
So
This makes sense. And then it was everyone.
Yes. So the Fall River police arrived at the house, and with them came a swarm of concerned, curious and downright nosy townspeople. Dr. Bowen had been found, and he also arrived
Are you
at the
skipping
scene.
into my section, investigation? I think you are.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to finish it because I want to get a tiny bit, so shut up and listen, okay?
Fucking whore.
So Dr. Bowen had been found, and he also arrived at the scene soon after. So now the people in the house are the police, Dr. Bowen, Mrs. Churchill, Bridget, Alice Russell and Lizzie Borden. Somebody asked for a sheet to cover Mr. Borden, and Bridget supposedly said, quote, better grab two, which is a bit foreboding considering the police had yet to discover Abby Borden's body upstairs. And then my final part, and then you can continue.
So, well, that's fine. You've just taken my first 3 paragraphs.
Oh, well. Lizzie's sister Emma was away visiting Fairhaven and was
sent... grab a fucking hatchet.
And was sent a telegraph to return home, but apparently she didn't take any of the first 3 trains available.
Let me find where I have to pick up from 1 minute.
Well, like, I mean, you probably have it a bit more detailed than I do.
So everyone testified that Lizzie was acting strangely at the time. Lizzie did not seem at all upset and didn't outwardly display any emotion. Lizzie's story kept contradicting itself in responses she gave to the initial question she was asked. Initially, Lizzie had claimed that she was in the barn at the time of the murders, looking for iron to fix her screen door. But later she said she had been in the barn looking for lead sinkers for an upcoming fishing trip.
Lead.
Lizzie spoke of being in the backyard and hearing a strange noise coming from inside the house before she walked in and found her father's body, and then that story later changed to having heard nothing strange and being surprised to find his body. Lizzie's story was a mess. One of the strangest parts of her story was when she told the police that when Andrew Borden arrived home, she had helped him to change out of his boots and into his slippers, which was clearly not true, as in the crime scene images he was still wearing his boots. Lizzie said about Abby Borden's whereabouts, as you said, that Abby had received a note and gone out, but then Lizzie claimed that she thought she had heard Abby come back at some point and that she could be upstairs maybe. Most people in the house found Lizzie's demeanour and attitude disturbing, considering she was so calm after what's happened. What doing?
Snapchatting you.
Oh. So most people in the house found Lizzie's demeanour and attitude disturbing, considering she was so calm after what's just happened. While this, of course, caused suspicion that maybe Lizzie was responsible for the murder of Andrew, police first had to find out where Abby Borden was so that she could be notified of the death of her husband. Bridget and Adelaide took on the task of checking upstairs to see if Abby had indeed returned home earlier like Lizzie had claimed. And Bridget and Adelaide were about halfway up the stairs, so they were up far enough to be able to see the upstairs floor. So they turned their heads and looked into the guest bedroom through the railing, and that's when they saw Abby Borden laying on the floor, bludgeoned and dead. The only thing that stood out so far was the strange behaviour of Lizzie Borden. Someone had murdered her father and her stepmother in broad daylight, and she was too calm and almost emotionless. Now, John Morse's demeanour after the murder was also seen as suspicious. He had returned after the murders and spent some time in the backyard picking a pear from a tree before eating it, and then going inside the home. However, John did not know about the murders until he was told when he entered the house. John reportedly spent most of the day outside in the backyard after viewing the bodies. Some people thought this was strange behaviour, but it could easily have been a normal reaction out of shock to what happened inside the house. And I'm pretty sure if that's what I'd arrive back to, being inside the house is also the last place I would want to be, because that's where it happened.
But as well, like, this is his sister's kids. There's his nieces. Well, Emma wasn't in the house, but Lizzie's his niece, and Andrew would have been his brother-in-law, so I would imagine with the family connection there, maybe he wanted to stay close to try and find out information if he could.
Exactly, but just not to be... Well, I don't think I think what people were saying was weird isn't the fact that he stayed in the back garden, it's the fact that he didn't stay inside the house with everyone.
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't stay inside the house either.
Emma, as you'd said, Emma Borden had no idea the murders had happened as she was visiting friends somewhere else. A telegraph was soon sent to Emma for her to return home, and she didn't take any of the first 3 available trains. And the Fall River police that were at the Borden home on the morning of the murders were later criticised for their lack of diligence in the searching of the house and the people in it. Even though Lizzie's demeanour and behaviour was not normal for the circumstances, investigators didn't even check her thoroughly for bloodstains.
As you do.
You know, standard. While the investigators did look around, it was a brief examination, and it was said that they didn't even check the women who were present in the house that morning for anything out of place on them. Of course, at the time, it was taboo to look through a woman's belongings, so apparently a bit of taboo overruled the fact a double murder had taken place and could well have been double parricide. Parricide obviously being the murder of a parent.
Not parenticide, no?
No, well, parricide is apparently the murder of a parent or a very, very close relative.
Oh, okay. Right.
So it also was made note. It was also made note of that Lizzie Borden was menstruating that day. Therefore, any bloody items of clothing that could have been in her room may have been disregarded or overlooked by the men investigating. After all, it was 1892.
Yeah, and there wouldn't have been like forensic testing or anything.
Later, during a search of the house, Fall River police found multiple hatchets in the cellar. One of the hatchets giving rise to even more suspicion. The hatchet's handle had been broken off, and even though it didn't have any blood on it, the ash and dirt the hatchet had been placed in was disturbed. It also seemed that the hatchet had been covered in a layer of dirt to make it seem like it had been there a while and not used recently. However, even though the search had uncovered the hatchets, they were not taken straight away. They were left in the house for a few days before they were even taken from the house as evidence. So, clap, well done.
Good job.
And remember that note that Lizzie claimed had been delivered to Abby, which is why Abby supposedly went out for a bit. That was never found. When asked by the police where it was, Lizzie said that she had thrown it in a wastebasket, or if Mrs. Borden's pockets had been checked for it. Lizzie could not remember where it was. Lizzie's friend Alice was with her and suggested that Lizzie may have thrown it into the fire to get rid of it, to which Lizzie replied, yes, must have put it in the fire.
Okay.
On the evening of the 4th of August, after the police had finished their immediate investigation, Emma, Lizzie, John and the neighbour and friend Alice, and I assume Bridget, remained in the house. There was still blood on the wallpaper and carpet, and the bodies were starting to smell, because they were still there too.
Oh my God.
Fall River officers were stationed outside to keep people out, but also to keep the residents of the house in. There was enough suspicion on those in the Borden house to want to keep them there. Could John Morse have been the killer because of potential financial or familial motivations? Could Bridget have had resentment for Abby, even though I've seen no evidence of that so far? And then you have the most likely culprit, Lizzie. It was no secret that Lizzie resented Abby and her father, and her behaviour was strange following the murders. On top of that, she kept contradicting herself in terms of her alibi. Mm-hmm. An officer said that on the evening he saw Lizzie and Alice go into the house's cellar, the door to which is located outside, hence the officer seeing them.
Yeah.
They were carrying a kerosene lamp and a slop pail, which are used obviously as either a toilet or for when shaving. Mm-hmm. It's likely that it belonged to either Andrew or Abby Borden. Both women exited together, but Lizzie soon came back alone, and the officer could not see what she was doing, but she was said to have spent some time bent over the sink. A few days went by without anything really happening. Lizzie and her sister Emma were in the kitchen, because Emma was back by now. Like I said, it's a few days later.
Yep.
Alice was also with them, as she had spent a few days with them as the proceedings with the police went on and the investigative measures were put forward. A reward for the capture of the murderer, and a small section in the newspaper by Emma seeking information about the sender of the note that Abby Borden supposedly received before her murder. In front of the kitchen stove, Lizzie was holding a blue dress. Alice questioned, Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm trying not to cough into the microphone.
Right. Allergies. Where was that? Oh yeah. So Lizzie was holding a blue dress. Alice questioned Lizzie, wondering what she was doing with the dress, and Lizzie told her she planned to burn it as it was supposedly soiled, faded and had paint stains on it. Now, a dress back in those days would have taken at least 2 days to sew, and it getting ruined only weeks after being finished would have been extremely disappointing. Lizzie said that she wore the dress around the house when no visitors were over, but if it were only in those instances that she would wear it, how did it get ruined? Mm-hmm. Another discrepancy in her storytelling. The day before the destruction of the dress, John W. Coughlin, I don't know how they'd pronounce that there, the mayor of Fall River, spoke with Lizzie and informed her the investigation had developed and she was the prime suspect and would soon be taken into custody. How professional, totally not the worst thing you could do.
Nope.
Alice was certain that destroying the dress was an awful idea and that it would only put even more suspicion on Lizzie. Alice was reluctant to speak about what she saw regarding the dress until later on during the trial.
Okay. So my next few sessions, I was going to say. Sections are actually fairly short. I suppose with this being such an old case, it was a little bit difficult to get certain bits of information. So, just in terms of the inquest, we'll say. The first hearing of Lizzie Borden took place on August 9th, happy birthday to me, and was mired in conflicting statements and...
What does mired mean?
Just
full of, like?
Full of, yeah.
Okay.
So there was lots of conflicting statements, and as well, Lizzie had been prescribed frequent doses of morphine for her nerves, which is believed to have led to some medicated confusion, and it probably impacted her testimony. Her behaviour was described as, quote, erratic and difficult, and she would refuse to answer questions, even ones that would have benefited her and would have actually made her case of being innocent stronger. She also consistently contradicted her own statements and provided varying accounts regarding the day's events. So basically, like Josh said, she would say, 1 minute she would say, oh, I was ironing in the kitchen, and the next it would be, oh, I was out in the barn, or I was out in the barn looking for lead sinkers, and then it would be, I was looking for iron to fix my screen door or whatever. So she was.
And I'm not being funny. I know the
herself.
maid isn't necessarily the handyman, but would the maid not have been the one to fix the door?
Yeah, like you would
just
think so.
going by, you know, if they're a live-in maid, surely things like that would be down to them.
Would be part of their job.
Not to be sexist, but going by the times, would that not be technically a man's job?
Yeah,
so
like
either
a handyman.
Andrew or the maid or a handyman.
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
Now, he is tight with money, so they could have done things like that themselves amongst the family. And Bridget was literally, as just her title, a maid. Maybe she did some cooking, cleaning, that kind of thing, windows, and no handiwork. But still, that raises questions too.
She just contradicted herself a lot on the stand as well. So apparently Lizzie's calm, no emotion demeanour during the inquest, as well as the aggressive questioning by the Fall River District Attorney, led to many people, including some of Lizzie's friends, believing that she was responsible for these awful murders. And because the murder and the trial was so highly publicised for the time, like the media had a large hand in how
because
she
I
was
suppose
portrayed.
Even sometimes to this day, depending on your generation and stuff, newspapers gospel.
Yeah, exactly. And like so like the media had a lot to do with how she was perceived by the public, because
so there
I
you
suppose
go, guys.
If you weren't directly involved in the trial, you weren't going to know what was going on, you weren't going to know certain things, so you would get it from the newspaper.
Yeah, so even in the 1800s, the news was brainwashing people.
And that's the thing, the newspapers do like to sensationalise and make things seem a lot worse.
I feel like back then, you didn't have tabloids and broadsheets. You know, it was like everything was a combination of both. There was sensationalism and fact.
Yeah.
But I suppose
it was all mixed together.
Exactly. So
muddy.
How can you tell what's 100% and what's opinionated?
Yeah, exactly. So as soon as word had gotten out about the murders, the Borden home was swarmed by people wanting to peek inside. And actually the day after the murders, so August 5th, John Morse had tried to leave the house, but there was so many people outside the house that he actually got mobbed so intensely that police had to escort him back inside the house. Like, are you fucking serious?
I'm going to end. Okay, continue anyway. It's not that.
That's all I have on that section.
Oh, okay.
But how much do you have?
Not a whole lot left in this case, really.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot left either, so we can find a new location after recording this one to record the next two.
Sure, they're only doing it at the front anyway, and the microphone doesn't seem to be picking it up that strong compared to our voices.
Okay.
Anyway, so the trial didn't take place until the 5th of June 1893, which was 10 months after the murders. Just before Lizzie's trial, an axe murder had taken place in Fall River, and it had noticeable similarities to the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. However, even though the grand jury of the trial commented about it, it was determined that the axe murder that had just taken place and the murder of Andrew and Abby Borden were not linked. The man who was to blame for the recent axe murder was not in the area of Fall River on the 4th of August 1892.
Okay.
The most notable things that were mentioned by the court and the newspapers were the potential murder weapon and Lizzie being present in or around the Borden house at the time of the murders. In terms of the story Lizzie told at the trial, just like in previous questioning and during the investigation, it didn't make sense. Times that were testified to and recorded did not make sense. Her claim that she had spent about half an hour in the barn before going back to the house and discovering her father's body was never confirmed. The hatchet that was in the basement was shown during the proceedings. As I said earlier, when the hatchet was found in the basement, it was missing its handle, which was likely disposed of due to it being covered in blood. Mm-hmm. Forensic testing on the blade did not find any presence of blood, indicating that if it was the murder weapon, it was cleaned down very well. Which leads me to have questions about when Alice and Lizzie went into the basement that evening.
Yeah.
But anyway, But also, it was the very late 1800s, so forensic testing would have been nothing compared to what it is now anyway. Now, I know it was a different time back then, but this next part I find extremely disrespectful to the dead. A few days after the funeral, a cemetery autopsy took place and the skulls of Andrew and Abby Borden were taken and cleaned. Then the skulls were shown in court so that the severity of their deaths could be seen, and also an attempt to prove the hatchet was the murder weapon.
Oh my
the hatchet was
God.
placed into the wide breaks of the skulls to show that the hatchet could very well be a match for the size of the blows to the skull.
That is disrespectful as fuck.
Yeah, so, you know...
Let them rest in peace.
Says. So yeah, despite it being extremely distasteful in my opinion, this was a huge development for the public, and Lizzie even fainted at the sight of it. But to be fair, I think guilty or not guilty, that's a justified response.
Yeah, that's my dad's skull.
You know, it's not every day you see skulls.
Yeah.
As the trial went on, there was no shortage of contradictory testimony and conflicting facts. Officers who had first located the hatchet in the cellar reported conflicting sightings of seeing a wooden handle next to it, and even though there was some potential evidence that may have pointed to the hatchet being the murder weapon, it was never convincingly shown to be a definitive murder weapon. On the 20th of June 1983, the grand jury was sent to deliberate, and it took them only 1 hour to come to a decision, and they acquitted Lizzie Borden of the murders. The evidence against Lizzie was considered circumstantial at best and was not enough to prove her as the murderer, and that the press and investigators had made her out to be. Without any concrete evidence, Lizzie was a free woman. Once Lizzie exited the courthouse after being declared a free woman, she told reporters that she was the, quote, happiest woman in the world, unquote.
As you do. So I'm just going to tell you a few theories that I found about the case. Again, very short.
And the last thing I have is later life, and that's only a snippet really.
Yeah,
as well.
and again, I have a snippet for my next section. It is quite difficult to find a lot of information.
But to be fair, not lying, we chose this case intentionally for it to be a bit shorter compared to the last few giants.
The last few have been very long. So there isn't actually that many concrete theories, but here's what I have for you. So the first theory was put forward by author Ed McBain, who often wrote under the name Evan Hunter. And he claims that Lizzie Borden was gay and was having a sexual relationship with Bridget Sullivan. And that when Abby caught the two of them and reacted negatively, they killed her. And then Lizzie went on to confront and kill her father as well. Now, homosexuality would have been extremely frowned upon in this era of history, and so Lizzie would likely have hid her sexual orientation, fearing a negative reaction from her family. And it's thought that actually living through that feared negative reaction may have drove Lizzie to murder her stepmother and her father. Now, Bridget did go on to leave Fall River and move to Montana, where she met her husband and lived the rest of her life. Reports are conflicting, but it's said that on her deathbed, Bridget confessed to having changed her testimony and leaving things out to protect Lizzie.
Okay.
So another theory is that Andrew had at some point...
But then as well, I also think you don't need to be lesbians with each other to keep it out. Like, if you were the living maid, and God, we don't know how many years she could have been living for maid, you're going to probably have respect for the people in that house.
Yeah.
And see them maybe to some extent as family. So protecting could just be in a friendly way.
Yeah, it could have been, okay, well, I
care about you.
I knew that she burnt her dress, or I knew that what she did with the handle off the axe or something, and I never told anyone. You know, it could be something small. So another theory is that Andrew had at some point fathered an illegitimate son who had tracked him down and killed both him and Abby in a blind rage. Which, I don't know, like I don't read nothing that could support that.
That seems like a Wattpad fan fiction or something.
Yeah. Another theory is that it could have been Bridget Sullivan snapping after being made to wash the windows in the scorching heat, but as you said earlier, there's nothing to support that either.
Yeah, and why kill Andrew as well?
Yeah, and why would Lizzie protect her? Because
Andrew wasn't there.
Yeah.
Well, I can understand how Lizzie might protect if it was just Abby.
Yeah.
But, like, most of her, like, their resentment and hatred seemed to be towards Abby. And, you know, a bit of resentment and not too happy with Andrew. But I feel like the most of it was an Abby thing. But then again, could have been like, you're the one that brought Abby into this house, you bastard. Do you know?
Yeah. And the last theory is that maybe Lizzie and Emma had killed Abby and Andrew because their father had been sexually abusing them.
Okay.
Or that Bridget had killed them for the same reason, to protect the girls from being sexually abused.
Yeah.
There is one more, just kind of a throwaway theory, that maybe Lizzie had been in a fugue state, like a dissociative state, and did it while she was in that state.
Like a psychotic break.
Yeah, like some kind of psychosis or something. But unfortunately, we'll likely never know what actually happened to the Bordens.
Like, it does sound like it was Lizzie.
It does, but...
I feel like if this was something that happened in modern times, it'd be a case closed fairly fast,
yeah,
you know.
Like with the forensics that we have and everything, and like digital footprints and all of that. Now, again, there is no evidence in anything that I have come across to say that Andrew was sexually abusing his daughters.
Same.
But yeah, I just don't think we'll ever know for sure.
it's just all speculation, really, the whole case. So, in later life, after a year of being the main suspect in the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden, and in many people's minds she was probably still the main suspect, Lizzie continued to live in Fall River. However, now she went by Elizabeth A. Borden. Lizzie nor Emma would ever get married. As it was ruled that Abby was killed first, everything belonging to Abby would have gone to Andrew Borden if he hadn't also been murdered. Therefore, everything of Abby's and Andrew's went to Lizzie and Emma. They inherited a large amount of property and wealth. However, a lot went to Abby's family in a settlement.
Okay.
Lizzie and Emma moved out of the Borden house and into a large and more modern estate on the hill, which was...
They got their toilet!
Yes, which was the wealthy neighbourhood of Fall River, and where Lizzie had wanted to live her entire life. They named the house Maplecroft, and they had live-in maids, a housekeeper and a coachman. Lizzie was also known to have multiple Boston Terrier dogs, which symbolised affluence. And after her death, it was instructed that they be cared for and buried in the nearest pet cemetery. Despite being accused of the murder of her father and stepmother, Lizzie still ended up living the life that she'd always wanted. Even if she had committed the murders, it paid off to some extent anyway. I say to an extent because even though she was trying to live as a wealthy and influential member of Fall River's high society, she never really managed to, not without the everyday challenges of being excluded by the Fall River community. Even though she was acquitted, rumours and accusations did continue to go around for the entirety of her life.
Yeah.
And that's that.
So Lizzie Borden lived with her sister Emma in Maplecroft until 1905, when Emma suddenly packed her shit and dipped.
Emma was like, ciao.
So according to one source I saw, this was because of Lizzie's fondness for house parties. So Emma ended up settling in Newmarket, New Hampshire.
Newmarket, Mexico.
And Lizzie spent the rest of her days alone with the staff of the house in Maplecroft until she died of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927. Only 9 days later, Emma would also pass away.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, the sisters were buried next to each other in Oak Grove Cemetery in Fall River. They were buried in the Borden family plot, not far from Andrew and Abby. And Lizzie left most of her fortune, which was about $567,000 in 2018, to an animal charity called the Fall River Animal Rescue League, which, fun fact, actually still operates today.
Oh.
And that is the case of Lizzie Borden, guys.
So, yeah. I'm inclined to believe it was Lizzie,
I think it was Lizzie. Lizzie did it. A lizard bitch.
Exactly. Very that. Very, very that. Yeah, I think guilty, and I think it would have been even more obvious had forensics been better, but again, 1892, for God's sake.
What can you do?
What can you do?
So, yeah.
You can just whip out the hatchet and hope for the best.
Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she
I
saw
feel
what
like
she
she'd
had
be
done,
rolling
she gave her father 41.
in her grave at the fact that rhyme calls Abby Borden her mother.
Yeah, definitely. So there you go.
But anyway, yeah. And with that out of the way, we're going to whack on with the next case.
Yep, and always remember, if you don't give us 5 stars, Lizzie Borden is going to be at the end of your bed at 3 a.m. with her hatchet.
Now.
That's all I'm going to say. Good night and God bless.
So yeah, thanks for listening. Remember the 5 stars. If you have any case suggestions and whatnot, feel free to get in touch. Your best bet is Instagram or Facebook. Yeah, and I think that's it. There's really not much else to say.
No.
And we're going to move on to the next recording. So see you soon, guys. Well, listen to us soon, guys.
Bye.
Ciao.